1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3. To continue recording where you left off, press 4.
Again, if you are not a speaker, please mute your phone.
If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3. To continue recording where you left off, press 4. If you're satisfied with the message, press 1. To listen to your message, press 2. To erase and re-record, press 3. To continue recording where you left off, press 4. Sorry you're having trouble. Your message has been sent. Please try again later. Goodbye.
Hello, everybody. We will be getting started here in 2 minutes. We will get started here in just a second. Cassidy, do you want to go ahead and start the recording, please?
Recording has started.
Thank you. So welcome, everybody, to our second learning session of the Pre-Hospital Pediatric Emergency Care Coordinator Learning Collaborative. As a reminder, we are recording this, and it should be available later today. And I will send that link just as soon as I have it, and we will also post it to the Peck Learning Collaborative webpage. And again, if you are not speaking, please mute your phone, as we are getting a lot of background noise. So the acknowledgement that we have to read is the Health Resources and Services Administration, Maternal Child Health Bureau, EMS for Children Program, EIIC is supported in part by the HRSA of the U.S. Department of Health and Services under grant number U07MC29829. This information or content and conclusions are those of the author and should not be construed as the official position or policy of, or should any endorsements be inferred by HRSA, HHS, or the U.S. government. And again, some housekeeping rules to go over. So to reduce background noise and interference, please only use phone audio. If you are not speaking, please mute your phone. Some of you do not have it muted right now, and we're getting some background noise. And do not place on hold, as some phone systems have on-hold music. And please hold questions and discussion to the end or submit via the WebEx chat box. Our learning objectives for today is, after this webinar, you will be able to do the following. Summarize the recruitment efforts used in Massachusetts and how that relates to your recruitment efforts. Discuss the components of an effective communication and dissemination plan.
Welcome to
and
WebEx.
discuss how these are
Enter your access code or meeting number.
Okay, let's hold for a second because we need to figure out.
Enter your attendee ID number. Follow.
Okay. Cassidy, are we good to go?
Yeah, hold on one second.
All righty. Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Yeah,
Are we good to go?
yeah, my apologies. Just give me 1 minute. I'm having to go through and mute everybody that's on a headset or on their computer because that's where we're getting the feedback. So if you are on one of those two things, if you can mute your audio and call in, that's definitely preferable. That's why that information was given. Sam, just give me 1 more second and I will try to figure out where this feedback is coming from.
All righty.
All right, we should be good. Go ahead. My apologies for the delay.
All righty. Thank you, Cassidy. So I would like to introduce now our guest speakers for our first presentation. Dr. Emery Peck currently serves as Chief of the Division of Pediatric Emergency Medicine at Tufts Medical Center, Floating Hospital for Children in Boston,
is not available.
And also chairs the Pediatric Committee of the Massachusetts College of Emergency Physicians. Chrislyn Boggs is the project coordinator with the Emergency Medicine Network, EMNet, at Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston. And I will turn it over to you all.
Well, it is great to be with you all. We really appreciate the opportunity to share with you some of the learnings that we've had over the past couple of years from our experiences as we've gone through some of our processes. So, as some of you know, we have worked in Massachusetts to identify a pediatric emergency care coordinator in 100% of our EDs in the state, of which there are about 73. And our goal was to do this by the National ACEP meeting last year. And this, of course, is a SMART aim. It is specific. It's measurable. We communicated with the Massachusetts College of Emergency Physician membership through our newsletter, which you see on the left here. And our goal was throughout the state to establish this role using web-based resources, and we'll come back to that in a moment. And then we wanted to eventually be able to hopefully have success and use our model to expand establishment of pediatric emergency care coordinators in other states as well, and as we're doing today, in other venues as well. Okay, my slides are not advancing.
Double click on the screen.
Yep, I did. Why don't you try and take control back and see if you can just advance it. Here we go. I think there was a slide before this. No, okay. I guess next screen. So to Chrislyn for this.
front of you, these are our Peck change maps, which indicate which of the 73 Massachusetts EDs had at least one Peck in 2016 before the intervention versus in 2018 afterward. So before officially starting this intervention, we assessed Peck prevalence in every ED based on their response to MNET's National ED Inventory Survey. It was helpful to have this idea of exactly who already did or did not have a Peck because we were then able to target our initial communications to the two different groups. Emory still contacted all EDs that did report a Peck in order to obtain their contact info for the network, and he then contacted those without a Peck with a different message, essentially asking those ED directors to appoint or name someone who could volunteer at least a few hours per month to the Peck role. Next slide.
All right, so we want to share with you sort of our process and what we did. So what were we trying to do? Well, I think this is very important, and this really relates to what you're trying to do in the EMSC world as well, is really to be very careful and specific about identifying exactly what the ask is. So one of the things that there's been quite a bit of national discussion around is exactly what we want to do and whether we want to delineate a list of roles for these. Whether we want to delineate a list of roles for these pediatric emergency care coordinators, and that can be quite substantive and even onerous, or do we want to do something different? And what we wanted to do was, as a starting point, simply is to identify a pediatric emergency care coordinator for each emergency department with, frankly, minimal expectations of what they could do and leaving that role open as to what that might entail for each emergency department director working with their Peck. We know that we wanted to make this as easy as possible for people, so we wanted to create resources, and we created a website, www.masspediatrictoolkit.com, which brings for these ED directors and Pecks really a compendium of different kinds of resources, guidelines, video clips, some learnings from other places. There's a lot of information there that the Peck can use to help educate their particular department. We created periodic emails then to push this information out, and we do quarterly emails that are fairly substantive with monthly emails to keep touching base with the network that we've created. We try and keep these very sort of bullet points short and sweet. And then we also encourage the coordinators to contact us with any questions that come up in their departments. On the website, we have made the names and contact information of all the Pecks in the state available in a password-protected area so that people can contact each other and help to, again, make this network more robust. And we also have the Peck status of all the EDs is available in an application that Krislin's going to talk about a little bit. So next slide.
All right, so this is the MNET Find ER Now smartphone app. And as Emory just briefly described, one of the ways that we were able to track progress over time and also to help encourage the appointment of Pecks was by making Peck status publicly available in this app. So this is an app whose primary purpose is to show the distance and directions from your current location or a searched location to the closest EDs anywhere in the U.S. But you could also click on individual hospitals or EDs and find more ED-specific information. Most of this is obtained through our national ED survey, but we also make other data updates in real time. For this intervention in particular, we used Find ER Now as a motivational tool. So basically, each time we learned that an ED had appointed a new Peck, we updated this information almost immediately in the app. So as you can see here, EDs that are more likely to be prepared to care for children, such as those with Pecks, have a little baby icon next to their name on the closest ER screen. And I think Emory can attest, especially as we were getting closer to 80% and then to 100%, that this peer pressure component, if you will, seemed to help motivate EDs to want to appoint PACs. Unfortunately, this app does not include EMS agencies, but for those of you without an app or without some sort of dynamic website, such as the Mass Pediatric Toolkit site, another simple idea for sharing of information that Emory did touch upon in the last slide is if you have an emailing or mailing list of different EMS agency leaders, use this to provide periodic short updates to the group. So through the monthly updates that Emory spoke about that we send to Mass PACs, one thing that we continue to do to try to keep the group motivated is include updates on response rates and results to follow-up questions that we've sent to them. Next slide.
So very briefly, the timeline that we went through, we wanted to share with you. We started this project at the beginning of last year by really making this a priority for the Pediatric Committee of the Massachusetts College of Emergency Medicine with the help of the Emergency Medicine Network. We got the board of MACEP to endorse the project, and we started with about 34%. In April, we went and sent those emails that Chrislyn mentioned at the beginning to all emergency departments. July and August, we did follow-up phone calls, and this was a challenging process. It meant sort of cold calling hospitals in the state, trying to find out who the director was, because we found out that directors change frequently, and having up-to-date information was challenging. We eventually, for non-responders, had help from the board of MACEP. By November, we were up to 85%. We started monthly emails. In May of this year at our annual meeting, we talked about this at the annual meeting of the MACEP and did our final push to get to 100%, which occurred over the summer. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, I know we're short on time, but some challenges and solutions. So really critical, I think, perhaps most importantly, to as one is thinking about this, whether it's emergency departments or EMSC, is really putting yourself in the shoes of the other, as is true for any relationship. Many of the EDs had other priorities. A lot of times adult care is really the priority because pediatric volume is less. So it was essential, we felt, to make this as easy as possible for them, hence the development of the website and other resources. And relationship building was really critical in making these calls. Finding the right person, challenging. It required just repeated efforts with emails and phone calls to each director. And it was most difficult as we got toward the end. That last 5 or 10%, not surprisingly, was probably the hardest, just requiring multiple phone calls. Keeping track of all of this is essential. I used sort of a combination of Evernote, which some of you may be familiar with, a great tool for keeping track of these things, as well as Excel spreadsheets. And then we're working to expand this a little bit to some other states as well. And Chrislyn, you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so briefly, just to follow up on that point, I guess the biggest emphasis here is that every state is a little bit different, and I think as many of you on the call probably have already experienced, there's really not a one-size-fits-all approach, even within individual states, and there are sometimes different stakeholders that need to be considered state to state. So, for example, there's one state that suggested that we get all of the major health systems on board first and then tackle all the other EDs. Another suggested that we tackle the project by geographic region within the state. That said, I really would like to emphasize that one common theme that we've seen throughout is that it's extremely important to be persistent. We saw not only in Massachusetts, but we're also seeing in the few other volunteer states that a few enthusiastic ED directors tend to respond to our initial correspondence or outreach, but then the vast majority require follow-up. So as Emery mentioned earlier, this typically starts with an email, but then often requires many phone calls in order to identify the right person and have a conversation with them. So definitely be as persistent as possible. So if Emery doesn't have any final notes, that concludes our section of the presentation. I hope this was helpful. Thanks again, Sam, for the opportunity to present our work. As you know, I do have to sign off a little early to go to another meeting. Emery and I can take any initial questions at this time, but if anyone on this call later on has questions specifically for me or for EMNET, including for Carlos Camargo or Ashley Sullivan, please feel free to contact me. And Sam, please feel free to share my email with anyone in the group.
Well, thank you, Chrislyn and Dr. Peck. We appreciate you being here today. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Peck or Chrislyn at this time?
Dr. Arbark, I believe you had a question, but I think it was answered, but I didn't want to glaze over your comment in the chat box.
Well, my question was more for our collaborative and encouragement, but thank you to Chrislyn and to Emery. That was a fantastic parallel to some of our work, and in seeing that parallel, I was just curious if any of the teams had a ongoing, regular email communication process, such as Emery had suggested. I was curious for Emery and Chrislyn. Do the teams feel overloaded by the emails? We obviously don't want to seem like we're spamming people. Do you think once a week is okay? What's the feedback been on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We are very sensitive to that exact issue, and we discuss every email that goes out, both the frequency and the content, making sure that it's not too frequent and that the email is focused and basically bullet points, short and sweet, as we said. I think doing anything weekly, I think, is probably too frequently. People are just so bombarded with email. I think monthly is probably the most frequent that you would want to do anything. What do you think, Chrislyn?
I agree with that. I think especially, someone just stepping into a new role, maybe at the beginning weekly is okay, but I think then you want to take a step back pretty quickly. In Massachusetts, at the beginning, we were, I believe, every other week. We sent a few emails at the start, and then we took a step back because, exactly as you mentioned, Emery, we didn't want to bombard anyone with information.
Okay,
well thank you so much. And for the group that's on the call, Chrislyn and Emery's team will be available. Chrislyn's email is there. I know that we are at an early phase in this work, but hopefully some of the stories that they mentioned, particularly in terms of engagement and communication strategies, can be things that will apply in our work across the states. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Yes, thank you both. And I'll go ahead and, as we're moving on to our next section, introduce our next speaker. Dr. Julie Leonard is an Associate Professor of Pediatrics and Pediatric Emergency Physician at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. She completed medical school, residency, and fellowship at Washington University, St. Louis, Missouri, and is a board certified in pediatric emergency medicine. Dr. Leonard practices medicine in the emergency department at Nationwide Children's Hospital and currently serves as the Director of Clinical Research for the Center for Injury Research and Policy and the Associate Director for the Center for Pediatric Trauma Research at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus. She is also a research collaborator in the Pediatric Emergency Care Applied Research Network, or PECARN. Dr. Leonard has published extensively in the area of cervical spine injury management, and recently completed an NIH grant aimed at laying the groundwork for the development and implementation of pediatric cervical spine injury risk assessment tool that will be used by both pre-hospital and emergency department providers. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Leonard.
Hi, thanks. So Cassidy and Sam had asked me to talk about a series of workshops that were put together in Ohio over the past year. So just as a means of background for those that aren't familiar with Ohio and Ohio's catchment. So Ohio is the 7th most populous state in the United States, and a quarter of the population is children. Very segmented or fractioned EMS systems. We have over 1,200 EMS agencies that service Ohio, and again, it's been pointed out, very few of their transports are for children. So, but the good news is that in putting together our workshop and for getting information out, we have a lot of eager stakeholders. We have 7 children's hospitals within the state of Ohio, and all of the hospitals are very active in our EMSC committee at the state level. So when the new performance measures rolled out and the recent round of the EMS agency survey was on the horizon, the committee got together and, talked about what a possible strategy would be to introduce, the 2 new performance measures, the big one being having a Peck affiliated with your agency. So we came up with the idea of conducting workshops throughout the state that introduced the concept of a Peck and the roles and responsibilities of the Peck. Next slide, please. So basically, as I mentioned, we have 7 children's hospitals and a lot of, I guess you can say, expert presence on the state EMSC committee and people who are eager to get this message out. So it was very much, this workshop, a grassroots effort of the committee, and the timing was right to do it. But as I pointed out, we have a large state, and it's geographically, diverse, and so we needed to make sure that we conducted workshops that were accessible throughout the state. So in some circumstances, we partnered with the local children's hospitals, but in other circumstances, we actually had to, partner with agencies and other organizations to make sure that we, had one of these workshops held so it was accessible to the EMS providers. The workshops were half day and, of course, free, and we fed people, all good things, and importantly, had the workshop approved to offer continuing education, and then we basically people have talked about how you get a hold of agencies. Well, we pretty much used every possible means we could think of. So has been discussed on these calls and the smaller group calls, one of the big challenges is most states don't have a comprehensive mailing list that includes a contact from each agency. So we relied on mailing lists that our children's hospitals had, and pushing the workshops that way. Our state websites, flyers, just, every possible mechanism that we could get the word out about the workshops. Next slide. So the workshops themselves, as I mentioned, are half day, and we broke it down into a format that we felt was good for the adult learner. So we tried to make sure that each content area, was 30 minutes, kind of short and sweet. And so we led off with an introduction to what a Peck is, and really just breaking it down based on the published guidance, and stepping through kind of an overarching, this is what the role looks like, and these are the people that could potentially serve the role, and kind of the, very just overview of what our day was going to be like. And then we actually had a section that just immediately addressed what people, once we introduced the idea, immediately addressed what people would perceive to be barriers at their agency to actually Peck implementation, and just immediately kind of, acknowledge the elephant in the room, the time, the money, the resources, the access to expertise. And then we went and broke out into smaller group sessions that were really based on 3 of the key roles of a Peck. So we had a breakout session that was run based on pediatric focused quality improvement, and so running through the basics very quickly of QI methodology, and then a breakout session that introduced them to developing pediatric-specific guidelines and protocols, and introducing them to the state and national resources that can be used to develop their guidelines and protocols for their agency, and then hit best practices in conducting pediatric skills assessment. So that, again, is one of the roles and responsibilities that have been identified for a Peck, but it is also one of the performance measures. So, hit that as a core kind of competency for the Peck. And then we basically wrapped up the day with reviewing the EMS for Children program and the Pediatric Readiness Project, and the EMS agency survey that was about to be distributed to agencies throughout the state. So that was the format of the day. I think that kind of the key to the success of the way that we structured the workshop is that we had kind of diverse speakers. So as an example, when we conducted the workshop here in Columbus, we had our somebody who was substantial EMS experience at all levels present the barriers to Peck implementation and facilitate that. We had one of our lead QI methodologists from the Children's Hospital come, and who also happens to be a pediatric emergency physician, lead the QI session. And then again, somebody who has serves as a medical director, a lot of experience with developing pediatric guidelines and protocols, lead that session. And then had somebody that has a background as an EMT and a nurse who runs our simulation center at Nationwide Children's actually come and talk about best practices in conducting pediatric skills assessment, and again, very relatable because he had an EMS background and could understand the learners and address some of also the challenges needing to scale in terms of, low fidelity versus high fidelity. So next slide, and I won't go through these, but again, we broke down, key objectives that were really, this blitz of an introduction to what a Peck is. Next slide. So in terms of the success, how interested were, people in the workshops that we conducted. We conducted 7 workshops in 6 cities, and one of them was associated with a statewide annual EMS conference, and they, specifically asked that we come and present the workshop at their annual EMS conference. We had, and if Joe is on the line, I think we had approaching 200 participants that actually attended. I will say that, like anything that's free, we had a lot of people sign up and not show up, but in the end, we were actually very pleased with the fact that we had 200 participants and representing a very diverse group of EMS agencies, many actually coming from rural communities. So if we, touched at least 10 to 15% of the agencies throughout our state in this kind of campaign that we did. And many actually did come with the true interest of adding a Peck. So Joe, as part of his current work, is working on a post-workshop survey with one of the fellows at Rainbow, and so we should have more to come to know, like, what our actual impact was on people moving from no Peck to having a Peck in place. And then we've actually taken this model, massaged it a bit, but it's going to be held at the National EMS Physicians Conference in January as the pediatric workshop. Again, it's been, the content matches, very nicely to our current efforts. And then finally, there's talk both here locally and at the EIIC of actually creating learning modules, similar in content to what we presented, that can be online learning modules. Again, just those really practical tools of, like, this is how you get it done, that can be just taken off the shelf and either used and as in person, that people could take it off the shelf and then conduct the discussions themselves, or also push out the learning modules. So that in briefly is the Blitz. We had any questions about the workshops?
I believe Dr. Arbach had a question. He asked, if you know the approximate cost of the workshops and if the facilitators, participants were paid for their time.
And that was what I was, actually kind of getting at. So the facilitators, it was all grassroots. So we, we basically had some individuals like Joe and, Dr. Alatoy and myself, who made ourselves available to other regions or other workshops to serve as speakers. But in general, what the EMSC committee did is created a slide set, and then there was a lead at each location, and they recruited speakers with the content expertise necessary, and basically used the slide template. But again, we relied on just kind of local talent and expertise at each of the sites that we conducted it at. And again, we held it at, it was pretty much, no cost to conduct because we just leveraged every resource we had in terms of, getting people to donate things ultimately. Did that answer your question, Mark?
It did. Thank you.
Yep. I would say that honestly, children's hospitals, are a good resource, and I'm sure that everybody on the call already taps into their children's hospitals, but there are a lot of people that are, interested and eager and are willing to actually help out.
So are there any other questions before we move on? All right, perfect. Well, we'll talk about a tool now that I just shared with everybody on the call. That was the blip on the screen that you saw, so everybody should now have access to that document. If not, I'm sure Sam can share after. But a useful tool is the Quality Improvement Project Charter that you can actually use to do some of the work that Dr. Leonard just spoke to. So one of the first steps in setting up an improvement project is to write a project charter. It's a guiding document that helps a team structure its improvement project and develop and communicate a shared vision. The charter provides a rationale and roadmap for the team's work and can be used to clarify thinking about what needs to be done and why. It also provides a key communication tool to help inform your team, colleagues, constituents, sponsors, stakeholders, whoever you might need to educate about the Peck project that you're working on. The charter helps keep the focus on specific opportunity or problem and identifies the improvement that team members need to take on. So this should be familiar for anybody that was on the call the last time in October. The charter begins to answer the 3 essential questions that the model for improvement asks. So those questions, just to refresh, are what are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that a change is an improvement? And what change can we make that will result in that improvement? This tool again provides a template for developing an improvement project charter and includes an example of a completed charter, the one that I just showed you. Your project may require answers to some of these questions and not others, but we encourage each of the team to think carefully about the effect that each question might have on your project. The goal of using this charter is to help the team begin the important process of thinking through the project. So think of this as like what you used to do in school when you would create an outline for a paper that you were about to write. The charter is very much that tool that you can use for when you are starting your Peck collaborative. Developing an improvement project charter is an intuitive process, and the team should review the charter periodically and look at ways to improve along the way. Again, this is a useful tool to share your accomplishments with your stakeholders and keep people informed about your progress. So with that being said, we will turn it over to another example for you guys.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. So, yep, that's me, Rhode Island. Hi, everyone. This is Carolina Robert Santana. I am actually pick up the phone. So Sam asked me to share a little bit of what we're doing in Rhode Island, and I kind of wanted to start by saying that I did start this project about 2 years ago, so it's not something that I started now. When we received the grant, but initially what I did was once I received my data from NEDARC, I kind of looked at who had responded yes, who had responded no, who had responded that they were interested, and who had responded that they were planning to add a PEC. And based on that, I started reaching out to different EMS agencies depending on their response. I pretty much didn't touch the no people. I went more to the who was interested and who was planning to add a PEC, and started kind of letting them know about the role and what it meant to be a PEC. That was probably at the beginning of this year of 2018. The other thing that I did was I initiated a conversation with my office, the Center for EMS, and we had a great opportunity where our whole state was modifying all the rules and regulations. And so I took the opportunity and plugged in there the pediatric emergency care coordinator as one of the primary roles within the EMS agency and as a requirement for licensure for all EMS agencies. And that's still in process. It hasn't been completed, but it's currently in our rules and regulations to be approved by December 31st, 2018. Now, in terms to this project, I just wanted to give a little bit of background. So contrary to what Ohio has, we only have, in 2017, only 57 EMS agencies assessed, of which 13 said that they had a PEC, 4 planned to add a PEC, 14 were interested, and 26 did not have a PEC. And so what I did through that licensing process and through the communications that I've had over this past year, I actually obtained a name. So I said, you have to have someone who is interested in pediatrics or somebody who could share this role within the EMS agency. So out of the 55 EMS agencies, we assessed 57, but 2 closed over this past year. So out of the 55 EMS agencies, we identified 46 agencies, so 46 names, that's how I call them, identified for each EMS agency. And that was my starting point, because now I had this person that I could contact and develop a relationship with. And so part of what we're going to do with this Peck Learning Collaborative is to actually develop a certification process for each EMS provider, EMS Peck or pre-hospital Peck, that will include training, the overall, that intro training that Ohio presented, so for them to learn about what a PEC is and what the EMSC program is and what benefits the program can bring to a pediatric person within an EMS agency. But then there's going to be a deeper dive into, we're going to have them participate in PALS, Pediatric Advanced Life Support, PEP, Pediatric Education for Pre-Hospital Professional, and do a skills lab simulation for which they would participate. And the goal is to address performance measure number 3. So they're prepared to be able to actually practice these skills and encourage these skills within their EMS agency. And so currently we're in the process of recruiting people for the initial intro PEC training. Out of the 55 EMS agencies, 26 responded that they would attend the training, and about 24 registered for the training. The training is going to be November 29th. Of the 24 that registered for the training, 6 are part of the 14 that were interested in adding a PEC. Now, one of the surprising things with my data is that I'm finding more response. So 10 out of the 26 that did not have a PEC responded to the training, but only 4 of the 13 that had a PEC are responding to my request for training. And so the biggest, so that's one of my learnings. I'm addressing the people who said that they had a PEC because those are the ones that are not responding right now. In terms of communication, I know Dr. Auerbach asked this. I am actually emailing people every day, but the way I'm doing it is if the agency responded to my survey or to the registration, they will not get an email. So the people that are getting the email are the people who are not responding to my request. So every day I look at my list, I look at how many people responded, and then I'll copy and paste all the people who did not respond, and they will get an email. And so worked a little bit for the doodle poll, and it's been working. So right now, before the call, I sent that out again to the 25 that have not responded, and 3 people just signed up. And so people do not feel like I'm spamming them. It's a gentle reminder, and I change the email every single time, and it's like, hey, hi, I noticed you haven't registered for the training. Just wanted to let you know your deadline's Friday. And so we will be providing food. It's actually going to be 4 sessions, 8 to 11, 11 to 2, 2 to 5, and 5 to 8. We're hoping to train from 8 to 10 in each session, so our goal is 40 people. And currently we have 2 sessions that are full and 2 sessions that have just 1 or 2 people. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or if, Sam, if that was what you needed me to share.
Yeah, thank you, Carolina. I do see one question in the chat box that asks, how is this Peck training session structured, and what's the content?
All right, great. So currently I'm finalizing the agenda, but that was something that I did share with when I sent the email. So what we're going to do is when they get in, we're going to kind of start out directly with what is a Peck, talk about the EMS for Children program, and hello? Oh, sorry. And I'm trying to find the agenda. But then the second part of it is going to be a discussion, and the discussion is mainly to discuss challenges of this program that we're trying to implement, and also challenges in pediatric emergency care that they've seen. I've never had an opportunity to actually get that type of feedback directly from EMS providers. And so it's going to be an opportunity to kind of tailor future training, especially as we're looking to also include family-centered care training in the certification process. And so those are primarily some of the topics that we're going to discuss. Are the Peck participants and or the faculty getting paid? Nobody is getting paid. The Peck participants, their payment, and the way I've structured it is if they participate in the training, in the intro training, then they qualify to be PALS, PEP, and the other 2 trainings that we're going to do, the simulation and the family-centered care. And then in May, during EMS week, they're going to be recognized as pediatric emergency care coordinators for the state. They are going to receive an equipment bag for training, and they will have their certifications. 20 of them are going to become instructors. So the AAP is coming to train 20 pediatric PEP instructors, and our children's hospital is going to train 20 of them to become PALS instructors. So that's part of the sustainability piece. Any other questions? All right, if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me. And if you want any guidelines on pestering people, I am your person, because I will email them every day and call them if they need me to call them. So, yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So this time we'll turn it over to Dr. Arbach.
Hi, everyone. So hopefully we can hear from some of the participants. I'm going to ask that if you can make some comments about either take-home messages or what you're hoping to apply from what you learned today within the next few months coming into the meeting in person in January. So I'll give a pause here, and please appreciate any comments.
Hi, it's Erica in Wisconsin. I will take back with me the ideas around holding Peck workshops. I'm really excited about those opportunities, and it was great to hear some very tangible ideas on ways we can promote Peck, like the workshop.
That's one. We need two more. Thank you so much. We will have a community of practice as we have already. We will work to get the content from Carolina, from others, to hopefully make it easier for those of us that are doing this and learn from the lessons and the hard work that the individuals that have already completed these workshops have done. So we need two more comments.
Hi, this is Jason in Montana. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. My take home really is that maybe I need to stop worrying about as many times as I'm trying to contact folks. Obviously, in some of these other instances, that continual, whether we want to call it pestering or not, that's kind of feels from my side. But that pestering of folks continually is really what finally garnered response and hopefully some greater participation in the program.
Thank you. I think that's a great comment, and you know, I think engaging the people that have expressed an interest is always balanced with the trying to get more people to get involved. So I think you know, if you do have a cohort of people that are interested, starting to take some of the lessons we've heard here, even if it's emails, educational content that's fairly straightforward, and working towards some return on investment. I really like Carolina's approach of recognizing them as well as giving that advanced training to them. One more comment.
Mark, I wanted to add too that in my state team, I have EMS providers. And so they're also working like on the sidelines. We are very fraternal, and because we're so small, everybody knows everyone. And so they are kind of like nudging people and saying like, hey, I'm going at this time. Do you want to come? So we can all be together in the same group. And so that's happening too.
And I will put a plug in while we're waiting for the third comment. I think we heard from all three of our speakers about collaboration with a regional children's hospital or pediatric emergency physicians. While this collaborative is focused on pediatric emergency care coordinators and EMS, there are large cadres of emergency physicians, general emergency physicians, as well as pediatric trained emergency physicians and fellows who, it sounds like from our first speakers here, are a great resource for low cost or no cost education delivery. So definitely a lesson that I heard and that we should bring back to all of our states, that even if you are not localized at a children's hospital, that those individuals seem very passionate about this work and would be great partners.
This is Robin in Montana. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my take-home message is incentives. We need to have better incentives for why people need to be a Peck. I think Carolina's incentives are great, and I think her sharing that information is just great. So thank you.
All right, so that is 3. Thank you guys very much for your participation and engagement. The last piece here, and I guess I'll start this off related to the incentives in terms of barriers and opportunities. So I will say that from what I've heard here, there's opportunities, particularly in the enthusiasm where we're forming these collaboratives in the PECs to get people to support our training and education efforts, potentially without funding. One of the challenges, and I guess I'll put that to Carolina, in terms of funding for you know, some of those formalized courses, that not only does the train the trainer cost money, but then the ongoing certification costs money. So I'm just curious what model you guys are considering taking that formal, you know, merit badge kind of approach where there is an expense to not only putting on the course, but actually giving out the certification.
Yep, so I've thought about that, Mark, and one of the things is again, I'm blessed with having a very small state, so please don't throw rocks at me. So I had originally, before I knew this grant was coming out or anything, like I said, I started in January. My plan was to train 10 people every year for the next 4 years, and I had set money aside from the EMS for Children grant to do that. And so if, now that if I am able to complete all 40 now at the beginning of, like, within this year, which I'm hoping, or I mean by March 31st, then I'm gonna be able to use the funding in the EMSC grant for sustainability. So that's my situation. I know that other people have very different models. But the other thing that I like them to commit to, I don't want them to think that I'm giving them everything. So I might still do this, even though then I might supplement in a way, but just say, like, we're giving you this initial training. It's your job to continue the certification process.
Thank you. Those of you from some bigger states, Julie, I'm not sure if you're still on, but certainly Ohio is the opposite of Connecticut and Rhode Island in terms of number of providers. So from a sustainability standpoint and hitting all of the potential PECs, have you guys thought about financial barriers or ways of addressing that?
Yeah, this is Julie. That's actually why we had debated when we rolled these workshops out. We had debated whether or not we would associate it with a pediatric merit badge class, for lack of a better term. There's a number that we could choose from. Our concern was that it was exactly what you're pointing out, the financial sustainability of that, and often, what they learn in one of those classes, unless they're using it routinely, we felt like it, especially in this very, very rural areas, that we may not get as much bang for the buck in our state versus, teaching them where to, find the data, where are your resources, and, to stay, informed regarding pediatrics, and then again the basic tenets of, conducting good skills assessments and leading providers through simulations and different models for doing that. So that was just our strategic decision. I mean, we just really, again, felt like it wouldn't be sustainable if we were, having something that was potentially costly associated with it.
Thank you. And to make sure everyone's aware, for the EMSC performance measure, it does not need to be a merit badge or a national course. Certainly the skills assessment, as Julie has done, would be sufficient for that. So I will move back to Sam and Cassidy, and thank you so much for everyone's interaction and engagement. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Auerbach, and again, thank you to all of our speakers today. Real quickly, I just want to mention to all of you that the registration for the Austin Workshop is now available, and I'll be sending the link, a draft agenda, and other pertinent information to secure your travel approval to the state partnership team leads and our subject matter experts a little later today. And I would ask the team leads to please send this information to your team members who will be coming. This information will also be used to register you for the hotel, which we at the EIC will be taking care of your hotel registration. So you won't need to worry about contacting a hotel. And you will receive a confirmation of your hotel reservation from the EIC. And for those of you who need to stay the night of February 1st, we're having to use a different hotel due to space limitations at the AT&T Center for that evening, and that hotel will be the DoubleTree Suites, which is about a 5-minute walk down the street from the AT&T Center, or 2 minutes if you happen to hop in a taxi or an Uber, and we'll be taking care of your registration for there as well. So, are there any questions regarding any of that? Again, all of that information will be sent out to you later today. Hearing none, again, thank you all for your participation today. I appreciate it. Thank you again to our speakers. And if I don't speak to you before next week, I hope you all have a happy Thanksgiving. And that concludes our presentation.